Should the New York Mets gamble on Carlos Rodon to be the final piece in their starting rotation? I'll discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For those of you who don't know, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, you can follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan, or find some of my writing about the Mets or just about Major League Baseball at justbaseball.com. Now, on Friday's show, I discussed the Mets' depth on their 40-man roster when it came to their starting rotation. And while I believe that they could roll into opening day with the guys that they have, it is clear the Mets rotation is one arm away from really being potent. We know what they have with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. We believe that Carlos Carrasco and Taijuan Walker will be solid options for this rotation. But to add one more bona fide major league starter would take this team to another level, particularly if that starter is Carlos Rodon, who offers more upside than any pitcher left on the market, at least in free agency. Because you look at who else is left, it's Rodon and Clayton Kershaw. Outside of them, there's really no frontline starters left available in free agency. Sure, the Mets could go the Zack Greinke route, which we've talked about on previous podcasts. They could shop in the Tyler Anderson market for someone who's a real back-end starter, but this would be the one option where you could get a guy with ace-level potential on a contract that is not going to run you quite the same as some of the other starters that have been signed this offseason. And of course, Max Scherzer with the Mets, Kevin Gausman, Robbie Ray, even Marcus Stroman. Rodon should come in a tick below all of them, probably a shorter-term contract because there is a ton of inherent injury risk. But before we get into that, let's just talk about his career up to this point. Who is Carlos Rodon? If you're the casual Mets fan that doesn't, or not even the casual Mets fan, the Mets fan that does not watch, AL Central baseball and hasn't been paying attention to the White Sox for all these years. Well, Rodon was selected with the third overall pick in the 2014 MLB draft, and he debuted the following season. So he had a really quick trip through the minor leagues right up to the show. Originally, the White Sox wanted to put him on the same plan that they had Chris Sale on, where they broke him in the bullpen before eventually getting him into the starting rotation. For Rodon, that did not last long. They needed him in that rotation after starting off as a reliever. His second appearance was a start. Overall, he makes 23 starts in his rookie season, pitched in 26 games, and had a 3.75 ERA. 2016 rolls around. He does miss some time with a wrist sprain, but overall was healthy enough to make 28 starts, pitched to a 4.04 ERA. Then you go to 2017. Suddenly he's missing significant time due to injuries, only starts 12 games that year. Then in 2018, he started the season on the IL with a shoulder injury, ended up making it back to make 20 starts, pitched to a 4.18 ERA. That shoulder has been a problem for him throughout his entire career. You get to 2019. Once again, there was some shoulder issues, and then he had Tommy John surgery. So he made 7 starts. Middle of May, he goes down with Tommy John. He had a 5.19 ERA. Was not effective that year, probably because he was dealing with so many injuries. Makes his way back in 2020, but only pitches in 7 2/3 innings, has an 8.22 ERA. And after that, he was non-tendered by the White Sox. Yet he did pitch for them last year. So what happened? Well, they came to terms about 2 months later at the end of January after non-tendering him in the beginning of December on a 1-year, $3 million prove-it deal. Well, he certainly proved it. This past year, Carlos Rodon was one of the best pitchers in the American League, came in 5th when it came to Cy Young voting, was an all-star, pitched to a 2.37 ERA in 24 starts. His second start of the season, he pitched a no-hitter. He had 185 strikeouts and 132 2/3 innings pitched. That's a strikeout rate or a strikeout per 9 rate of 12.6. His walk per 9 was 2.4. Home run per 9 just 0.9. His whip 0.96. He was one of the most effective starting pitchers in baseball, but shoulder injuries once again popped up. He went on the IL with that. You look at the second half of the season, He was not readily available for the White Sox. Down the stretch, he ultimately pitches in a playoff game where he was only able to give them 54 pitches, got knocked around by the Astros in a game that ultimately was the last of the season for not only Rodon, but also for the White Sox. And then at the end of the season, after putting up this incredible year, you would think that this would have been the most slam dunk opportunity for the White Sox to get some compensation for Rodon. Because even though he did have all those injuries, the way he pitched, he was going to hit the market as one of the best starting pitchers available. Yet, they did not extend him the qualifying offer. Now, there is some rumblings that maybe that was because there was some gentleman's agreement that when he came back to the White Sox, they were going to let him hit the open market after that 1-year deal and be free of a qualifying offer. But then again, you hear the comments made by Rick Hahn, their GM, and it seems like that decision was more based on the White Sox plans this offseason, that they were nervous to tie up that much money in Rodon if he did accept the qualifying offer when they had other needs to address, and maybe they didn't have enough money to go into those other markets if this was a decision he decided to accept that qualifying offer and come back to the White Sox. And maybe because they have Lance Lynn and Lucas Giolito, they thought, all right, we don't need him as another frontline starter, so let's not extend him that qualifying offer. At the same time, that raises a ton of red flags to all these teams interested in him, because the team that he's been with his entire career, who's more familiar with his medicals than anyone, was not willing to extend him a qualifying offer after he pitched like an ace when they could have got some draft pick compensation. So that is the big debate with Rodon, and I'm going to talk about that more in just a minute. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky, waxy, or just taste like a chemical spill, Built Bars are delicious and come covered in 100% chocolate. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. That way, when you enjoy a delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. There's also so many delicious flavors to choose from, whether it's the coconut almond bar, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, my personal favorite cookies and cream, salted caramel mint brownie, and many more. In fact, Built is always coming out with new limited time flavors, so check out Built.com often and see what's new. And when you're there, make sure you use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's at Built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Now, before we talk about Carlos Rodon's fit on the Mets, whether they should pursue him, I want to go back through his season a little bit more because it really was a spectacular year. As I said, the 2.37 ERA, his strikeout rate of 34.6% was better than any pitcher in baseball outside of Corbin Burns, who had thrown at least 100 innings. That is remarkable from a starting pitcher. Now, Jacob deGrom at 92 innings pitched. Had he got to 100, he probably factors in that conversation as well. But this just shows you how dominant this guy was, that he was in that conversation with the NL Cy Young and Corbin Burns. Now, his walk rate is 6.7%, very low as well. If you look at the differential between strikeout rate and walk rate, his was the third best in baseball behind Burns and Max Scherzer at 27.9%. He also ranked among the top 10 pitchers in baseball when it came to his swinging strike rate and opponent's contact rate. So guys just could not square him up. He was unhittable for portions of this season. He has a fastball, a slider, and a changeup as his primary offerings, and he threw that fastball 58.7% of the time. Slider 27.2% of the time, changeup 12.4% of the time. The whiff percentage on his fastball was 29.7%, on his slider 40.6%. That's how you get a lot of strikeouts, as well as the whiff percent on his changeup at 36.3. He has weapons to go against lefties and righties. Just a really dynamic pitcher. Here's the problem, the injury, okay? The shoulder that has been bulky for his entire career. And then he also is coming off Tommy John. So maybe that was simply this 1 year. He really had his first full year back from Tommy John this season. Maybe that explains away that fatigue he had down the stretch. But you look at his numbers through July 18th, he was unhittable. Okay. And in that start, he throws 7 shutout innings against the Astros with 10 strikeouts and no walks. At the time, his fastball was averaging 96 miles per hour and had a strikeout rate of 36.6%. Ends up going out, has 3 starts that were lackluster, didn't look like himself, lands on the IL with shoulder fatigue, comes back August 26th, and only makes 5 starts over the final 39 days of the season. So you're not even talking about a start a week. It's a start every 7.8 days. That is concerning. And only reached 80 pitches on one occasion in those 5 starts, with the fastball velo down 3 miles per hour. Now, the strikeout rate, because of that, dropped off to 27.2%. Still very good, but not where it was. Now, he still pitched to a 2.35 ERA. So despite everything, despite the concerns, despite the fatigue, despite the worry about what he could be moving forward, even when he was diminished, he was effective. That's what makes him an interesting gamble. Because when he's on the mound, it seems like he's figured it out. He knows how to sequence his pitches. He's going to get batters out. But how much is he going to be on the mound? That is the only thing that you're worried about here. If he was healthy, if there was no injury concerns, he would have been right up there with Kevin Gausman and Robbie Ray and Marcus Stroman as one of the best starting pitchers on the market. No one was going to be Max Scherzer, and Max Scherzer got the huge check. He was the one that got the average annual value way over 40. It's insane. But this was the other market that most teams were shopping in. These starters that were in, their late 20s to early 30s. I think all of them actually might be in their early 30s. And he would have been one of those guys that was getting, the 5-year 115 or the 5 for 110 that was out there. Or even Marcus Stroman getting $25 million a year on a shorter deal. And maybe he has to follow Stroman. Maybe that's the play here. But the question is, how many teams are out there that are willing to give him $25 million? And then he almost got screwed over by not getting a qualifying offer, even though it makes him a more attractive free agent. It's a weird situation where, as much as that's great for him, because a team like the Mets is not to give up draft pick compensation to sign him, it also hurts because it just painted that injury picture even brighter for other teams. Like, oh, wow, that's really concerning. Why would they not want to extend him that qualifying offer? Because of what the Mets just did. Different situations, clearly, because Steve Cohen was going to spend like crazy. And if Noah Syndergaard came back on the qualifying offer and didn't pitch for the Mets, it really wouldn't have been of any real consequence with the way that he was willing and able to burn cash. But this was a guy, Noah Syndergaard, that didn't pitch to a 2.37 ERA. He was barely on the mound. He pitched, what was it, 2 innings, I think, the end of the season? Okay? And the Mets were willing to give him a qualifying offer because if he accepted it, all right, high risk, high reward, 1-year deal, who cares? If he declines it, sign somewhere else like he did with the Angels, all right, draft pick compensation. Rodon, to not get that qualifying offer, that is just alarming. And it makes you wonder, what is he going to get? What type of a deal could he get? And, who is going to be the team that's going to take this risk? And are the Mets that team? Because you can make an argument that this is already a high risk, high reward proposition, the 2022 Mets. A lot of old guys, a lot of injury concerns, and this would just throw another shot at the lotto ticket, another big risk you throw into the mix. Because if it all congels and everyone's healthy, I mean, it's an all-star team. So maybe you just go out and get another all-star and see what happens. Or is it smarter to have a solid pitcher you can count on in that rotation? Like the guy I talked about last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, Zack Greinke. Because Greinke, if nothing else, is going to be durable. He's going to give you innings. He's going to take the ball every 5th day. That's the risk and reward you're trying to weigh. And also the financial difference there could make the argument for Greinke. Or maybe you just want to get a lefty that can slide into the middle of that rotation, that can be just absolutely dynamic, and you can have the best 1-2-3 punch in baseball. Really, the best rotation in baseball. That is the question that we have to answer. I'll try to in just a minute. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action in 2022. New year, new updated desktop and mobile website. So sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using our promo code Locked On. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so like most prominent players in Major League Baseball that you would want to sign, who do you think Carlos Rodon is represented by? None other than Scott Boras, because it's always Boras, right? And he's already come out and said that, Rodon will sign a multi-year deal. That's what they're looking for. They want a long-term contract, or at least a multi-year contract, and they're not going to settle for a one-year deal. That being said, who knows if that is going to play out? You have MLB trade rumors earlier in the offseason. They projected him at 1 year for 25 or 3 for 60. That's generally the neighborhood people are projecting his salary. If he gets a 1-year contract, that average annual value, or just that 1-year deals, salary number is going to be a lot higher. If there is a team that's willing to give a multi-year pack, they'll probably get a little bit of a discount on that when it comes to the AAV. With that said, if you're the New York Mets in this situation, I am pushing back pretty hard on any multi-year commitment for Carlos Rodon because there is so much injury risk. Not to mention, you have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom that are already eating a significant amount of the Mets payroll moving forward. I just don't know if you want to lock yourself into, a 38-year-old, a 33 or 34-year-old. I think was deGrom coming into his age 34 season, I believe. Off all those injuries for deGrom, Scherzer getting to a point that's unprecedented for his level of durability this late into his career. Is that going to hold up? And then you add on a massive injury risk on a multi-year deal. That is a recipe for absolute disaster. So the Mets have to be very careful in these negotiations. And Boras is going to start off at 5 years, right? That's his MO. He's going to start at 5. He's going to look at Robbie Ray and Gausman guy. He's going to say, well, my guy's better and he's left-handed. So we'll say 5 for 125, even though no one's going to bite on that. And then maybe he'll drop it down. And then suddenly you're talking about a 3-year deal. But the one thing he's not going to do is he's not going to have Rodon sign a contract where he can't maximize his earning potential. I think that regardless of where he signs, this is going to be a creative contract. I think there's going to be opt-outs in the deal if it is a multi-year deal, because I don't think there's going to be a team that's going to pony up $20+ million over anything longer than 3 years. So if a contract is beyond 3 years, you have to imagine that the salary is going to be low and there's going to be opt-outs. So it might give him some security that he'll have a job and he can be in a rotation for years to come, but he's not going to make top dollar off of that one season in 2021 over the life of a 3, 4, 5-year deal. I just don't think that's going to happen. Could it be 3 for 60? Absolutely. In that case, would there still be an opt-out after the first year? Probably, knowing Scott Boras, because if Rodon goes out, proves it wasn't a fluke, then the 5-year contract comes next year. Then you play this thing out. That's what you're shooting for. So I think this is going to be a player that is not going to have a deal just waiting for him on the other side of the lockout. This could be one that drags out. This is going to be one that could be like a Dallas Keuchel potentially, where it could take some time before this guy gets signed. We really don't know. And that's just what happens when you have a pitcher with this much injury risk with high demands. And I think he's going to, and he deserves to after the year he just had. If it gets to a point where they are looking for the 1-year offer and they're going to go to the person that's going to give them the most money, Boras is going to call up Steve Cohen. And that's where I can see something getting done. Because even if it's a $35 million deal, which it wouldn't be, but I'm just, for the purpose of this argument, if you look at the Mets payroll right now, they're already at least 54 over the luxury tax. They still have to address their bullpen. There's still the pipe dream of Chris Bryant that a lot of people are trying to speak into existence. I don't think it's realistic. I've gone into it. No reason to bring that up on this podcast. But when you factor in the fact that they are at least going to spend, I would think, an additional $20 million, that tax bill is going to be ridiculous. They're already at a point where they're about $15 million away when you factor in penalties to be a $300 million team. So if you were to sign a $10 million player, you're already pretty much a $300 million team when you get into the additional penalties that signing would accrue. So when you are going to blow through the luxury tax, as Steve Cohen has previously said, if you're going to do it, blow through it. If it's a 1-year deal, I don't really see any limits. I think Steve Cohen is looking at this team and they can be as expensive as possible. This is a prove it year. This is almost his first year of ownership, even though it's the second one. He kind of gets a pass for last season. This is the time where he was fully empowered, had a full off season, brought in his own GM, his own manager, started from scratch, spent a ton already. And in that sense, if it's a 1-year deal, I don't really care what the number is. You go out and get this guy and you look at your rotation 1 through 3, and you're going to have DeGrom, Scherzer, Rodon. Those 3 are healthy. The Mets are the best team in the National League. No doubt about it in my mind, honestly. I don't think there's even an argument. I know how good the Dodgers are. They don't have the 1, 2, 3 like that. They don't. That's how good the Mets could be. But what are the chances that DeGrom and Rodon are both healthy? I don't even know if it's a 50-50 chance. Because Rodon has never proven to be healthy, and DeGrom's coming off his most injury-plagued year of his career in his 30s. I look at the Mets rotation right now, and do you need upside or stability? Because I look at Carlos Carrasco, and I see a lot of upside there. His career track record, much better than Rodon's, okay? And it's not like he relies on velocity the same way Rodon did this past year. So I look at a pitcher like Carrasco with all that experience. Would I be shocked if he pitched to a sub-3.5 ERA? Not in the slightest. Taijuan Walker pitched to a 2.66 ERA in the first half last year. Would we be completely stunned if you put it all together for a full season? As he's now further and further removed from Tommy John? No. So they already have some high upside guys in their rotation right now. But the floor is terrible because Carrasco coming off an injury plague year. Taijuan Walker had an awful second half ERA. You're not sure if he's going to be that pitcher again for a full year. Maybe he's the second half guy the whole way through. And then you can't even have him in your rotation. I really think that if you look at where the Mets are, I would almost consider going the route of spending more money on the bullpen than the rotation at this point, because there's still some really high impact arms the Mets could sign with Ryan Tepera and Andrew Chafin and Colin McHugh, amongst others. So I'd build out that bullpen a bit because I think it needs to be addressed. And then I would look for a back end starter because, as I talked about on my last podcast, there is depth here. There is upside pieces in McGill, who could have a really good year. You have Peterson, you have Trevor Williams, but you can add in one more major league caliber starter like a Zack Greinke, and you're looking at a rotation where at least all right, Greinke and Scherzer have been healthy. Greinke and Scherzer should take the ball every 5th day. And then from there, you're like, hopefully DeGrom's healthy. And if he is, all right, okay, now you're cooking. Rodon is just such a huge question mark. But I also would be thrilled if they did it. I would be very excited if they went that route. It's a gamble. It is. It's a huge gamble. But again, if you're looking at a rotation that doesn't have a lefty, unless you factor in David Peterson, but I don't think any of us are penciling him into an opening day rotation just yet. So if you add that type of a lefty, a dominant strikeout machine of a lefty, into that rotation, man, it's scary season for these other teams in baseball. It's just so much risk. We'll see what the Mets decide to do. Steve Cohen, though, does seem like he would be a gambling man, and it's a gamble that could pay off in a World Series. And because of that, if it's a 1-year deal, I'm all in. The only thing I'm not in on with Carlos Rodon is being the team that gives him the multi-year big salary offer, because that could cripple you moving forward. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get your daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day by following Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.